Hello, hello, hello. My name is Jenna Mammina, and I am. Got it. I got it. I got it. Ah, ah. Ooh, ooh. 11, who you gonna call right now? It just felt good. It just felt good. Hello, my name is Jenna. This is 11:11 with Jenna. I am here 7 days, 7 nights, 14 times a week. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Hey, Bill. Hey, Suzanne. Hey, Julie. Julie, how are the dogs? What's going on? I am going to do a couple little maintenance things. It's really hot and humid, and I need to get some air. Hold on. I'm going to get the fan, so it might be a little loud, and I need to get a pair of glasses. Let's see. I haven't done these glasses in a while. Let me go do these. All right. What's up? What's up, homies? Oh, check it out now. There are 11 of you here. It's true. True. True as that. They're so big, aren't they? Oh, now we're down to 10. So we had a power outage today. I was on the show with Jeff Metzger, and then he disappeared, I disappeared, everything disappeared. It just all disappeared. And then I went for a cool walk tonight, and I ended up at a pool at the condominium where my parents lived, where we have a boat slip. And I looked up and I thought, thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Lisa. And then I jumped in the pool. Then I walked home and saw some friends. And yeah, it is hot and humid, that's for sure. It is. The core fam. No, it's in Kalamazoo too. Yeah, hey Bonnie Barker. Hey Jeff Metzger. Check it out now, Funk Soul brothers and sisters. And I am not going to take any more time except real quick. Let's see. Tomorrow morning, AJ. Tomorrow night. Yeah, I know, Phil. I'm so excited. Tomorrow night. I don't know. Thank you, Patty. I'm gotta go public. Gotta go. Editing the privacy. Making it public. Yep, done. Change the audience. And I don't know. Tomorrow night just might unfold. Monday morning we move. Monday night we meditate. Tuesday morning, Patty Loman. Tuesday night, Jenna Mammina in Telluride. Wednesday morning in Telluride. Wednesday night in Telluride. Thursday morning in Telluride. Michael Keel, Thursday night in Telluride. I'm in Telluride for a week. So they'll all be live shows next week. But this is the show that I've been waiting for about, I don't even know, for months, for a year, because it's been a while since he's been on with this particular. Anyway, you'll know what I'm talking about in a second. But I'm just going to post this really quick right now. And Gary Lambert. And it's done. And I'm going to copy and paste. And thank you, Rob Morocco, for the commercial. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rob Morocco. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, one more Saturday night with Gary Lambert. Woo! And the couch. And the couch. And the couch.
And I am unmuted. I am unmuted.
Unmuted and ready to roll. Hello, Michael Bartoloni. Hi. I like the shirt.
Oh, it's kind of
It's super groove.
almost like a golf shirt or something, but I haven't golfed in years.
Are you a golfer?
When I was a kid, it's been a very long time.
Did you go to like a golf camp or something?
Oh no. I went golfing with my dad, who was a pretty avid golfer, and I went to a sports-oriented summer camp, but golf really wasn't among the big things there. So let me see. Yes, I'm muted on Facebook, so I won't be hearing myself back seconds later. And I took your very sage advice and made myself a banana daiquiri.
Yay! I have coconut water.
Very good. That's very refreshing. Boy.
Let's see that glass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of a groovy 60s kind of look.
I'm gonna get mine. And I'm gonna fill it with my coconut water. My groovy 60s glass.
Yeah. I gotta tilt this so you can catch a little more of the couch because it's the last round for the couch. Last call for the couch.
So you were in storage today?
I was working in the storage space, yeah. Basically clearing out more space to make room for more stuff, which is going to go in the next few days. And that's your glass is not dissimilar from mine. It's kind of tall, highball glass kind of groovy thing. Yeah. Clink. Yeah.
Ruth Allison is here.
Yeah. So this was a fine idea. You mentioned something about making a.
So tell us, what's in your banana daiquiri?
Well, banana.
1 banana, rum, 2 banana, 3 banana, 4?
1 whole banana, which I froze a little bit in the freezer to, give it that extra frozen daiquiri kind of deal. And rum, of course, and a little orange liqueur. Grand Marnier is always my first choice, and some lime juice.
Ooh, I like.
And I only had 7 bananas in the house, so that's a dearth in this household, as you know. I mean, my standard is 36 at any given time.
Why 7 though? That's quite a bit too.
Well, yeah, it was just a bunch that had 7 in it. I bought the bunch, and there it was, 7 bananas.
Tie-dye Patty's here. Patty, I've been wearing the dress and the shirt and the dress, and oh my God, the shirt. Oh my God, I love your tie-dye. I love your tie-dye. I love your tie-dye. Thank you, Patty Hausman. So you're making room in the storage.
Patty Hausman's congratulating me for moving off the couch. No. The couch looms large in my legend. And the couch is going to be, it's going to be missed by legions of people. But
for sure.
I am taking the slipcovers.
Okay, so the couch is, hey, Rich. Yes, we have no bananas. We have no bananas today. Machiko Shimada. So the couch is being sold?
Well, there's been this whole thing I have told you about over recent weeks where an appraiser came, and then the appraiser has these clients who she brought here and showed all the stuff, and they made competing bids, and the high bid won. And I assume they're going to take whatever they think is sellable or desirable, and this kind of mid-century furniture stuff is kind of hot right now.
Yeah, it is.
But they'll have to take it without the slipcovers. But that's okay, because the original slipcovers are actually underneath. So
what does the couch actually look like?
The couch, it's kind of like a sectional thing. It's like it's got these 2 parts.
But what's the color of the couch?
Oh, the actual couch, it's a kind of a brownish, like tannish. I don't know how to describe the. Well, I could actually take one of the slipcovers off, and it's right underneath here. This is like this is you're going to see the naked couch now.
Oh, I'm in
the couch as purchased. See, it's this kind of I don't know if you can make that out, but it's got like a little kind of pattern to it, a little texture. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's as I remember it as a child. And then sometime in the late 60s or early 70s, it got made a little more and then it became a celebrity.
It became a big celebrity
in very recent history, with the assistance of John Mayer, who describes himself as a textile nut. And he said, I was interviewing him from the couch, and he said, "Man, that couch, is that fabric, is that a jacquard?" And I just cracked up, because here's this pop star and guitar god saying, "Is that a jacquard?" I have no idea what a jacquard is, but he explained. So anyway,
But the couch was on 11:11 before John made.
I think, yeah. Well, no, actually,
Yeah, you were on the couch.
I don't think I started 11:11 on the couch. I was doing it from the dining
You
room for a
started
while.
it, but you were on the couch.
Yeah,
You moved
but
around
but
quite a
but
bit. The couch.
but I but I also started doing shakedown stream
Uh-huh.
in the early pandemic days. So it's kind of a toss up as to who saw the couch first. But someone tweeted, "What's the deal with Gary's couch?" And then it just touched off all this enthusiastic conversation, and then the couch became a beloved furniture superstar.
Yay! Round of applause for the couch.
Yeah.
So, I think we need to tell the banana story really just to like ease our
Okay.
way
Yes.
in.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
For those
Bananas.
of you,
Yes. Bananas loom slightly less large in my legend, but at some point during the pandemic, um, uh, I was ordering a lot of groceries, and I used two sources. There's um, Instacart. Now, Instacart is an outfit that lets you order from any a wide range of local grocery stores, and so each grocery store has its own features and its own strengths and weaknesses. Then I was also ordering from Fresh Direct, which actually does not go to individual grocery stores, but warehouses its own food.
oh, they're their own thing. Okay,
Yeah, it is unto itself a gigantic store
got it.
that does delivery only. And I find that some of their things are better than what you might get from the local stores, and others are not. So I would alternate depending on what my needs were. Now, the catch is that they have different ways that their ordering protocol is slightly different. So if you order from Instacart and you want bananas, you say, I want 6 bananas, and you get 6 bananas. Now, Fresh Direct sells its bananas by the bunch. So one time, forgetting who I was dealing with, I was buying some bananas from Fresh Direct, and it said quantity, and I typed in 6, and I got 6 bunches of bananas, amounting to a total of 36 bananas, or maybe 37. Sometimes the bunches are different size. So I had a whole lot of bananas to deal with, and it was in the early days of 11/11, and so people were fascinated with just how I was going to eat all those damn bananas before they went bad, and damned if I didn't. And I came up with many banana-based alcoholic beverages, daiquiris and stuff like that. But my own specialty, the Ron Carter, and then I made like sautéed bananas to serve with some kind of meal, and pancakes with sautéed bananas, and
Sauteed banana.
very delicious. A little cinnamon, uh, and various banana treats. So I've had a lot of bananas on my cereal. Ate bananas just for the sake of eating bananas. So
Then
I
you were
got
down
through
to about 12.
I got through the 36 bananas without one of them going bad. So I was quite proud.
That must have been a heavy box.
It was a pretty well. Yeah, it was like a whole. They delivered several boxes of groceries, and one of it was all bananas. I was quite taken aback, but it was a beautiful thing, and it made for a lot of good laughs on 11/11, and that's what's important.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're moving.
Yeah, I mean, I'm moving in stages. I have temporary accommodations with some dear friends with a spare room, while the house is being prepped to put on the market. And that's going to be a process. That's going to go on for a while, but it is likely that I have to be completely out either by this time next weekend, or the couch will be out. You know, maybe not. I mean, what happens is the appraiser took the bids, the high bidder won, and they are supposed to come on Thursday, this coming Thursday, which means by this weekend, it's very likely the couch will be out of here. I may still be able to stay in the house a few more days, depending on when the contractors are going to come in and start doing the repairs on the house to prep it for sale. So, you know, but it's very likely my last week or slightly more in the house, which has been in my family for 67 years. My folks bought it on August 1st, 1955. So 67 years ago, this past week. You know, it's the house I spent all but the first 4 years of my life in before I grew up and went away and then came back. So it's a big deal. You know, it's an emotional thing, but it's also, you know, the people who made this house the home it was are not here physically. So if I'm not here physically, and ultimately the house may not be here physically because of the trend of people tearing down houses and putting up atrocities. So the house may be gone, I will be gone, you know, but the house will always be in me, you know, a lot of memories in this place.
Yeah. What's a favorite memory in that house?
Oh man, just when we first came here, there were two things that totally flipped me out. The massive backyard, you know, a backyard of the size you just do not see within the confines of New York City. It goes like way out, and then it takes a turn and goes way further back. You know, it could be a hole on a small golf course. I mean, it's just this enormous backyard. And so when I first showed up here at the age of 4, very hyperactive 4, you know, I just went running around in the backyard like a maniac because we had been in this, you know, little this row house in another part of Queens, which had really no backyard to speak of. So that was amazing. And then I was also fascinated by the fact that there was a laundry chute that went from the first floor to the basement. And I took off my little baseball cap and dropped it down that laundry chute and ran down the stairs and came back and dropped it down that laundry chute countless times. And that was like, you know, I was sold on the house right from there. It was just something to do.
You never tried to get into the chute.
No, I couldn't quite. I don't think I could have quite fit it, even at my smallest. It was kind of narrow, but I might have tried.
Yard, what was in the yard?
It just was, you know, just a lot of space and trees and.
Does it feel as big now?
It couldn't feel quite as big now, but it still stuns people when people come to see the property, and I think it's going to be a big selling point because, you know, if people are moving here with a family. I mean, we never did, but you could have a swimming pool out there. You could build a second small house out there, a guest house or something. You know, it's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your mom was an athlete.
She was.
And as a child, growing up with her, was she athletic with?
Oh yeah, she never stopped. Yeah, she was a demon bowler. And she bowled well into her 80s, I think. And she played golf some. She played some tennis. You know, all recreationally. She wasn't like super competitive. She just loved doing all kinds of physical things. And she bowled really well. The funniest story ever is like my brother and I decided to take her bowling on, I think, her 82nd birthday. They were in LA visiting my brother and his family. And we said, oh, you know, let's take mom bowling. She said, oh, you know, I haven't bowled for a while. And, you know, I hate bowling without my own bowling shoes, and the balls are never right. They never fit my fingers. And, you know, certain kind of alleys. Long story short, she bowled a 238
Wow.
and mopped the floor with my brother and me. You know, she that was her lifetime high, was a 238. So on her 82nd birthday. So like I said, she remained athletic, you know, until she was very, very old.
How fun. And
yeah. My dad was a golfer primarily as far as sports went. He did a little track and field and stuff when he was younger, but he was nowhere near my mom's level of skill and accomplishment. But he played soccer and all that stuff in school.
How did your mom get into track and field in the beginning?
Well, in a totally unstructured way, she just loved running. She would always like race with the neighborhood kids and beat all the boys by a long distance. And she played soccer. She was the only girl in her class in her school for a while, and she played on the boys teams and always like excelled. She played soccer and all that stuff on the boys team, and was just a natural at it. I don't even know if she had ambitions to compete. She just loved doing it so much. And then she found the opportunity to do it competitively and got great at it.
And I'm getting questions. How good of a golfer was your dad, according from Jeff Metzger?
He was I think he'd call himself a mediocre golfer, but I think he won like his little country club. I think he won some kind of not the club championship, but he won some tournament there, and he just loved the game. It was not like something he pursued ultra seriously. I mean, he was insanely, he was a doctor with, just incredibly long hours, office hours and hospital rounds and all that stuff. So golf was really his refuge. He never got as serious about it as maybe he could have, but it just was what he did for pleasure.
And then they would go golf together. Yes, no?
They would golf together. Although my mom would then she'd wander off and want to feed the ducks or something. She didn't take it seriously, and I think the men would get somewhat exasperated with her, but she didn't care. But yeah, they were they loved hanging out together when they could, because my dad was away from the house a lot in his work. I mean, he put in there were sometimes 18-hour days, and he just he loved his work tremendously. And then on his days off, he loved to either golf or suffer with the Mets, who were very bad when they started, and he was a Mets fan. So.
And did your mom, when you guys would go to games, did your mom go?
The baseball games? Mm-hmm. My mom was a Yankee fan. My dad was a Mets fan.
Really?
Actually, yeah. My mom said the thing that what accounted for their long marriage was that my dad watched the Mets downstairs and she watched the Yankees upstairs. And actually, when I was born, my dad was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan because they were still here. And my mom and my brother were Yankees fans. So they tried to nudge me toward being a Dodger fan to even things out. So maybe when I was 4 or 5, I was kind of a Dodgers fan. But once I acquired the ability to reason, I became a Yankees fan. But also the Dodgers left. They stabbed New York in the heart and went to LA. So there was no question of being a Dodgers fan anymore. And then when the Mets came to town, my dad, of course, was overjoyed, and he became a Mets fan instantly. And I rooted for the Mets too. I didn't have that great partial war of the boroughs thing going on between Queens and the Bronx. I rooted for the Mets in the National League, rooted for the Yankees in the American League.
I understand that, being a Cubs.
And then when I moved to California, I had both the Giants and the A's. So I had 2 home teams there too. So I had a lot of choices.
I think we have had this question asked in the past, but I don't remember. How did your parents meet? This is
the weirdest. They met because of the Nazis. They met because of Adolf Hitler. They met because of this absurd situation my mother was in, especially, and my father was pulled into it as well. Well, I guess I should get into the details of her story. Yeah, I mean, she became a truly great track and field athlete. She played soccer in school. She played soccer in school. She did all kinds of sports, like anything that had to do with running or jumping or whatever. She was really good at it. She really loved doing it. And then, there was a local little athletic club that competed in track and other sports. And she joined that because she was completely uninterested in school. So she really wanted to just do stuff that was fun and also something she could be really good at. And she just became the local luminary. And then she became a nationwide, she became one of the best track and field athletes in Germany. And unfortunately, this all coincided with what happened in Germany in 1933, which was the Nazis coming to power and both my parents having the bad taste to be Jewish in Germany. So, everything ground to a halt for them. Like Jews were not allowed to compete with Gentiles. They were not allowed to be part of the national sports organizations. They were completely marginalized. And my mother could not compete although she was the best high jumper in Germany and also sprinted and did various other events. She was forbidden to compete among her non-Jewish peers. And in fact, she held the German record in the high jump, and it was expunged from the record books as though it never happened once the Nazis were in power. So I have to edit somewhat.
Is that high school, college at that point?
High school. Well, I guess she didn't pursue going to college. So she was in her late teens. At the time of the 1936 Olympics, which is when all this came to a head, she was 22. So she'd been out of high school for some time. But, she thought she was going to be, a competing athlete. She was in her prime years. And then all this was taken away from her. And she actually left Germany and went to England to compete. And she won several championships in England. But there was a little problem for the Germans, which is that they had been awarded the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. And when the world started getting wind of what the Nazis were doing and what they were doing, especially to Jews and other minorities and other marginalized people, they came under some scrutiny. And people started asking, should the Olympics really be in Berlin in 1936? And there was a very, very strong movement toward a boycott or canceling the Olympics. So my mother's in England, kind of oblivious to this and not caring if she ever went back to Germany, because as soon as the Nazis came to power, she became like a non-person. People she had been friends with shunned her. Same thing happened to my father. Because as we know very well in this country, people, sorry, I have the windows open to get some air in here. So you're going to hear, little motor sounds and stuff.
That's
yeah. People are very easily conned by demagogues.
Right.
And demagogues capitalize on people's fear of the other and people's desire to blame someone else for their troubles. And Germany, of course, had been in this very depressed state. They were in a depression, as much of the world was financially. They had been disgraced by losing World War I. So along comes this guy who basically was the equivalent of a red baseball cap that said, "Make Germany great again." And the conception of making Germany great again was get rid of the foreigners and the Jews and, right, all the wrong people. Blame them for our troubles, blame them for our inadequacies. So Jews just became scapegoats for just about everything. So my mother is in England competing. Germany is very, very seriously worried about the Americans boycotting the Olympics, the rest of the world joining in on a boycott, and possibly the Olympics being pulled out of Germany. So there was enough pressure in the United States that a delegation was going to be sent to Germany to see how Jews were being treated, to see if Jewish athletes were being given a fair chance and all that. So the Nazis came up with this scheme. They were going to put on a little show for the Olympic officials. And they created a completely bogus training camp in which Jews and Gentiles trained and competed side by side. And the cover story was that everything is fine. There's no oppression here. And people in America who knew better chose to look the other way for various reasons, because of political expediency, because of financial considerations. There were a lot of American industrialists who had lots of money in Germany. There were out and out anti-Semites in the United States government. There were isolationists who didn't want us getting involved in international affairs. I don't know how widely it's known, but I mean, Franklin D. Roosevelt was extremely popular. You know, he won the 1936 election by one of the biggest landslides ever. But earlier in 1936, he needed some really loathsome people in order to achieve what he needed to achieve, which is get out of the Depression and put America back on its feet. And in order, you know, just as so often happens, in order to get the votes he needed, he had to appease, you know, racists in the South and these people who wanted to keep doing business with Germany. So the United States was very reluctant to get involved in this potential Olympic boycott or any hostilities with Germany. You know, as great a man as Roosevelt was, he was also a politician. And he he said that certain political necessities existed. And that goes back, you know, that goes throughout our history. You know, compromises were made, which are pretty intolerable. In order to achieve one end, you impede progress in another. That's what was going on in America. Now, complicating this also was at the heart of the American track and field and amateur athletic establishment was a man named Avery Brundage, who at the time was the chairman of the U.S. Olympic Committee, and then he went on to a long tenure as chairman of the International Olympic Committee. And he was the person most vociferously and intractably opposed to a boycott. And the line he presented is that politics has no place in sports. Sports should be pure. Sports should be amateur. You know, sports. He was like he spoke this very idealistic language, but in fact, he was a raging anti-Semite who actually published little tracts, which can now be found online, about the pernicious influence of Jews in sports and American society. Oh yeah, look up Avery Brundage. You'll find some really dirty stuff. And also, he had a corrupt self-interest operating because he ran a construction company which was actively bidding to build the German embassy in Washington, D.C. So being pals with the Nazis was Avery Brundage, both his pleasure because he hated Jews and also his business interest. So he really cooperated with the Nazis in pulling the wool over the world's eyes. When the Nazis set up this training camp, you know, Brundage totally knew that it was a complete falsehood. It was a complete lie. And he just completely went along with it. So the American delegation and the International Olympic delegation comes to Germany. And what the Germans needed was some window dressing. And the biggest track star they could show to represent the Jews happened to be competing in England at the time. And they basically told her family, go to England and get her back here, or else there are going to be really serious consequences for you people. So my grandfather who I never met, went to England and told my mother she had to come back, or else their family could wind up in concentration camps, or any number of things could happen. Mm-hmm. So she did, very reluctantly. And this camp really, on the surface, it looked really idyllic. You know, she had friends who were Aryans, who were non-Jews, and they got along fine at the camp. But she also really was resistant to the idea of, you know, being on the German Olympic team after all that had happened to her. But the charade worked. The Americans said, "Oh, everything's fine here. You know, no bad treatment of anyone. You know, it would be ridiculous to boycott the Olympics, and they signed on to go to the Olympics. Now, at this camp was this guy named Bruno Lambert, who was kind of like, it would be the equivalent of casting extras in a movie. My dad did run track and field, and he was not a great athlete by any means, but they needed a certain quota of Jews at this camp, so he got put in the mix just because we need so many from so many different regions of Germany. And that's how my parents met. My parents met as a direct byproduct of this complete fraud perpetrated by Hitler. So I exist because of Adolf Hitler. That should keep me on a psychiatrist's couch for a number of years.
Generational trauma never hurt anyone.
Yeah. It's always been a very weird thing in my life, just how random everything is. So the boycott got called off. My mother actually, after that, she competed in the German championships, and that's when she set the German record in the high jump. And then I can't remember how many weeks it was before the Olympics. The day after the American team sailed, the day after they got on the boat to come to Germany, she got a letter kicking her off the team. And it was put in this language that was like, surely you could have not expected with your inconsistent performance to have made the team. Her performance was so inconsistent, she was the German champion and had set the national record in the high jump. Then they said, the letter signed off with, we will be happy to offer you standing room tickets for the track and field competition at the Olympics. You will have to handle your own transportation and accommodations. And then it said Heil Hitler, and was signed by the German Minister of Sport. So, she was utterly devastated and utterly infuriated. She did not take them up on the offer for a standing room ticket, needless to say. And the Olympics just went on, and the Germans basically sanitized everything in the country. They just rolled out the red carpet and made everything seem like it was just swell there. They took down all the signs of anti-Semitism, all the Jews go home signs disappeared. And it wound up being quite a propaganda triumph for Hitler, which was marred only by the fact that a black man, Jesse Owens, was the star of the Olympics, and made his theories of Aryan superiority look like the bullshit that it was. But she never got over it. She was just, she said she doesn't even remember if she even listened to the Olympics on the radio or paid any attention to it. One of the German athletes with whom she was friendly got the bronze medal. The interesting side story is the woman who was actually put in place to replace my mom, a woman named Dora Ratchen, who was being touted as the German superwoman, the perfect Aryan athlete. She finished fourth. She finished out of the running, and turned up many years later in Bremen, Germany, as Hermann Ratchen, and it had apparently been forced by the Germans to impersonate a woman.
What?
Yeah. And of course they didn't have hormone tests and all that stuff back then. So that was also part of the charade. Yeah. And my mother had very vivid memories of Dora being a little strange, not showering with the other women and having her own little room, where they all bunked together. And that's what turned out to have happened. Dora Herman. So there was that. And then, she vowed to get out of Germany as fast as she could, which she did in 1937, when it was getting much more urgent to get out of Germany because, the quotas were tight. And again, America was not that helpful in that regard. America was, did not expand the quotas, and, a lot of Germans died because the world did not get involved quickly enough. My father's parents and much of his family died. My mother's family was more fortunate. So she came here in 1937. My dad came very late in 38. He just made it out. He had been studying medicine in Bern, Switzerland, and I think he went straight from Switzerland to the States. Otherwise, he
So did
met.
they keep in touch in that time period?
Well, that was the funny thing. They didn't become a couple at the camp. Um, they were both involved with other people at the time, and through some strange, someone who was like a mutual friend of theirs, found out my mom was going to Frankfurt, Germany, and my dad was going to be there, and just like he wanted to deliver a message or something to my dad. And they said they agreed to meet, and they had just been friendly. There had been no sparks between them. And they said that when they saw each other in the train station at Frankfurt, that was the moment. That's it really sounds like something from an old movie, but it was real. Wow. And they became inseparable, although they were separated because my mom came here first, and then she was making efforts to get my dad over here, and then my dad made desperate efforts and failed to get his parents because the quotas just shut down. They had tentative passage on one of the last ships that was supposed to go out, and that ship got canceled, and they were never heard from again until my father learned many years later that they had died at Auschwitz.
Your grandparents?
My grandparents, my father's parents, yes. And he lost something like 30 of his cousins, aunts, uncles. His siblings made it over here through very circuitous means. I don't know if you know this whole story, but there were some German Jews who couldn't get passage to America right away, but they got kind of funneled through Asia. And my aunt, my father's brother and sister both lived in Shanghai for several years while waiting to get passage to America. And then they wound up in New York. They all wound up in New York. And, my mom started competing over here. She won the American championship in the high jump 2 years in a row. And one of those years,
so she started competing in America.
Yeah, she came here, and she got, she joined, I guess, what was the Amateur Athletic Union at the time. Even here, I mean, she was, she experienced discrimination here, like she couldn't compete at the New York Athletic Club, which was famously restricted with no Jews allowed. But she made it here, and she used to train right across the street from Yankee Stadium. Oh. And that's how she became a Yankees fan. She just saw that beautiful stadium. She said, okay, that's the team I'm going to root for.
Did she live in the city?
They lived on the Upper West Side, yeah. The first place they landed was the Upper West Side, when the Upper West Side was not as ritzy as it is now, when it was more an immigrant destination. And my mom, she shared a place with her brother and my aunt for a while, and then they wound up in Queens and various different locations in Queens before we landed here. But my mom was a successful athlete here, and she had aspirations. And she thought it would be a great thing to make the American team, after this horrible betrayal in Germany. But what happened was that the Olympics were canceled in 1940 and 1944 because of the war. And by 1948, the next time the Olympics came around, she was already a mom, and she was in her 30s. So, she was past her prime as an athlete. So she never got that opportunity. And just, it was a devastating omission in her life forever. She always said that people asked her if she thought she would have won in the Olympics, and she said, "I think I would have won because the madder I got, the better I jumped, and I was so goddamn mad." Yeah. So, yeah. So she harbored this rage for a long time, but didn't externalize it. She was such an incredibly warm person, and the experience just instilled in her this incredible sense of social justice and anti-racism. And she wasn't. I'm often disappointed by fellow Jews who are very tribal, who talk about the oppression of our people, And then they complain about black people moving into their neighborhoods or Hispanics moving into their neighborhoods. My mom was never like that. In this neighborhood, she would like argue with anyone who issued such complaints. She'd say, how can Jews of all people harbor any prejudice toward anyone else? And that, she instilled that in me. Both my parents did. They were among the first people to welcome Black families into our home when the neighborhood started to integrate. And that, that had a tremendous amount of impact on who I am and who I'll always be, So, the story just goes on for years and years after that. She didn't express her bitterness very often. And she kind of kept that to herself, and she didn't tell the story all that often because it was very painful for her. But it started to kind of leak out. There was this period in 1980, actually. She said she would never set foot in Germany again. I fully expected she would stick to that, and you could completely understand why. In 1980, I think it was, she started receiving correspondence from this man in her hometown who had learned about her story and just thought the world should know about it. That it would be tremendously instructive for Germans to know about. Germany completely swept the reality of the 30s and 40s under the rug. After they lost the war, after they were disgraced again, they wanted to act like it never happened, and so it wasn't talked about. Here we are again, where, America's passing laws where you're not supposed to teach kids about slavery, and you're not supposed to teach kids about, misogyny and homophobia. It was the same thing in Germany after the war. It became a non-subject,
and the
partially
community of the world of the
right. It became, and it was partially because Germany was embarrassed, but it was also partially because there were a lot of defiant Nazi sympathizer types in Germany who didn't want that part of the history known. So, but then as the generations changed.
And did you know this as a child?
I knew some of it. Again, my parents didn't talk about the past. I mean, my dad was so devastated by, his family experience that they tread very lightly, and I did not press them on it. But, there were newspaper clippings of my mom's accomplishments, and every now and then there would be a story about how they experienced discrimination once they got here. My dad experienced this kind of double discrimination because he was, here he was a Jew in America, but a guy with a German accent. So, some of the people he encountered thought he was a Nazi,
right.
And then other people discriminated against him because he was a Jew. But, he just put his head down and started applying himself to his medical career. And then the day he got his citizenship, he enlisted in the army so he could go back to Europe and participate in the liberation of Europe from the Nazis. Just the first thought that came to his mind. And he went and served and became a major in the army and won a Bronze Star, and was just an incredible story. And then he came back here. He and my mom lived in Santa Fe for a while because he was stationed in the Southwest. And they loved Santa Fe very much. They only reluctantly left Santa Fe. I think they bought their first car and drove back from Santa Fe. In cleaning out the house, I actually found the bill of sale for their first, whatever it was, 1947 Dodge that they drove back here. And my brother was born here. He was conceived in Santa Fe, but born here in 47. And I came along in 50.
Age difference between you two?
4 years. I was born in 51. So yeah, I knew the story. I knew the basics of the story, but not the depths of it, and not that whole Avery Brundage, thing was somewhat unknown to me. And then I found out, and there are a few people for whom I have a more white hot loathing than Avery Brundage, because he, for all those years, he presented himself as, he was the guy who kicked Tommy Smith and John Carlos off the Olympic team for doing the clenched fist salute, and wanted to strip them of their medals, and he was the guy after the massacre of the Israeli athletes in Munich. He didn't even want to pause the games for a few days in memory of them. The show must go on, because he hated Jews. So, what did it matter to him? So anyway, so the whole Olympic movement to me is a really corrupt joke, and I have no patience with it anymore whatsoever. I love the athletes. I love seeing them compete. My mom continued to watch the Olympics.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah. She always, she loved the accomplishments, she loved, and all at the same time saying what could have been, what her life could have been like. But then all of a sudden she started acquiring this respect from people who came to know her story. And in the early 80s, a few things happened. She got elected to a Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, and there were a few little newspaper articles about her, and she spoke at some events, and she was always a hit. She was a great natural speaker, and she gave great interviews and all that stuff. So there was this little burst of celebrity that she enjoyed, and then it subsided. But then in 1996, again, she had not been back to Germany, although my brother and I went on her behalf in 1995, because amazingly, a gymnasium was named after her in Berlin. And she just thought this was amazing, that, that Germany was making such a gesture. She still wasn't ready to go back. So she sent my brother and I to represent, which was a great experience. And it was my first trip to Germany. And, I went with some trepidation, because when you go to Germany, especially a Jew whose family had been through what mine had been through, is going to have some trepidation. And we were treated so incredibly well. And we started to realize, and we conveyed this to our mother, that a new generation, is not sweeping the story under the rug, and they want to make amends, and they want the history taught, and they want it to never happen again. And she said she can't hate that generation as she hated the Nazis, or the people who were silently complicit with the Nazis, which is pretty much the same as being a Nazi. So that experience really softened her, us going and getting that award. And she started getting all these nice letters from people in Germany and teachers who wanted to teach her story in schools. And she started realizing there's a value in telling this story. So the next year, the year after my brother and I went to Berlin, she was invited, amazingly, not by the American Olympic Committee, but by the German Olympic Committee, to be their honored guest at the Olympics in Atlanta. And she accepted. She and my dad went. And shortly before that, she was at some event on Long Island where she was being honored, and she spoke. And in the audience was a guy named Ira Berkow, who's a longtime and great sports writer for the New York Times. And he said, I got to get to know this woman. This is an amazing woman. And he interviewed her, and she was excited. She said, oh, I'm going to be in the New York Times. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, it'll probably be a nice little item in the sports pages. She was on the front page of the paper.
Yep, I remember.
Yeah, and it said, like, after 60, how many years, I forget, after 62 years, a right is wrong, wrong is righted, or something like that. I can't remember the exact headline, but I picked up the New York Times that day, and there's a picture of my mom high jumping in 1936, and I'm just completely mind blown. And all hell broke loose. In the very next few days, CNN called, and the Today Show called, and pretty much every news outlet wanted to talk to her. They wanted to interview her. They wanted her on their TV shows. And so at let's see, she would have been 82 at the time. I think 82. Yeah, suddenly she's like this massive celebrity. She's and she's so good at it. I've been actually going through some old videos and things of her, and just she was just such a natural. Just watched her being interviewed by Brian Gumbel on the Today Show.
Whoa.
And yeah, and she just was right there, so present and not nervous, and funny. And so she's and it was pretty much like that for the rest of her life. In a little later, her hometown named an athletic field after her. And then, this is really cool. A street near the Olympic Stadium in Berlin was renamed after her, which had previously been named after some Nazis. So that was beautiful. And she wrote a memoir that was published by the Holocaust Museum. She was very prominently featured in a Holocaust Museum exhibit on the 36 Olympics. And then HBO made a documentary about her.
So Rich wanted to be in. He wanted you to tell him when the movie's going to happen. It already happened, Rich.
Well, there was this HBO documentary, which unfortunately is not commercially available, but I'm going to figure out some way that maybe I can dub it into digital form and maybe like put it on Dropbox or so exclusively for 1111 watchers. Yay! Of course. I'll find a way that I can let people watch it. It has to be digitized, but I can figure that out now. I couldn't do it back when I only had it on
HBO.
It was on HBO in 1993. It got nominated for a sports Emmy. I went to the sports Emmy ceremony with her, which was a total blast. All this stuff, just kept happening. And then there was a dramatic film made about her in Germany. But it was kind of cheesy. It felt more like a TV movie.
Like the actress who kind of movie.
Yeah, I mean, it was a theatrical film, but I don't think it got very much distribution.
Lifetime lovers, I didn't mean.
Yeah, and it was kind of about they kind of played up the angle of Dora, and they kind of sensationalized that a little. Yeah, but it was not a great film, unfortunately, and is pretty obscure, maybe deservedly, but. Although the actress who played her was wonderful, didn't look like her very much or anything, but she was just like a superb actress. But there's still, I mean, she got inquiries for interviews pretty much until she couldn't do it anymore, until she was past 100 years old. She made herself very available. Yeah, so it was, that's it's a hell of a story.
It's a hell of a story. It's just, and then the book that William was referring to.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what he was referring to?
The book that she wrote?
Yeah, perhaps. Is that available?
It's very hard to find. It's out of print. The Holocaust Museum had it out for a few years. It's called By Leaps and Bounds. You can occasionally find it for not too exorbitant a price on eBay or something like that, or Amazon. I've seen it really expensive, but then every now and then you can find it for a decent price.
I've seen some of my CDs on Amazon and eBay for $800.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even contacted the seller. I'm like, why are you selling my CD for $785?
Right.
Because I'm like,
right.
How long were they married?
How long were they married?
Parents.
75 years.
75 years.
Yeah, my dad died just a month or two after their 75th anniversary, and not too long after he turned 103. And then my mom was around for another 3.5 years or 4.5 years, so she made it to 103 as well.
That's so cool.
Yeah, they were the coolest, and they were. They remain my heroes. They were heroic in every imaginable way. I mean, my dad was like very much in the background of all this when my mom was, being so celebrated.
Was he nervous about it? Was there ever...
No, he was incredibly proud. He was just so moved by the reception she got, and all that. And he was personally, he was a very different kind of person. He was not, that gregarious like my mom was. He was funny and warm, and but he was happy to let her be the star of the family. But he was a star in his life, in his community. Like, he was the most revered person. He had this medical practice in Ridgewood, Queens, for something like 40 to 50 years. I can't remember exactly when he set up practice there, but practiced until he was 84 years old. Went to work every day till he was 84.
That's beautiful.
And still made house calls, for cheap. Had 3 generations of families that he took care of, and was just the most adored person in that community. And everyone who knew him, he was just an incredibly lovable person.
Did they ever go to a Dead show with you?
Once, yes, that was my great triumph. Yes, I took them the last time the Dead played Madison Square Garden, the last night they played Madison Square Garden, I think. It was so awesome. I mean, because I'm 18 years old and I'm, running around behind this rock and roll band. They are somewhat dismayed, at my aimlessness in life. And my dad literally said to me, oh, well, following the Grateful Dead around is all well and good, but what are you going to do for a living? And then when I started working for the Grateful Dead for a living, I sort of said, ta-da. But they could not have been more delighted. And my dad was like, he said, you really stuck to it. You wanted to do that and you did that. And I'm really proud of that. And so I said, I've got to take you guys to a show. You've got to see what this is all about. And the Dead were playing the Garden. And my dear friend, Jan Simmons, who was the one of the tour managers, the assistant to Cameron, she arranged for the limo company that took care of the band in New York to comp me. So the limo came to the house.
Cool.
Limo came to the house and took us to Madison Square Garden and drove in the back way and up the ramp and parked right at the foot of the stage and dropped us off.
Wow.
And so they were just like, oh man, this is our son's a big shot. It was like, so I was so not a big shot, but it was so cool. And I took them backstage and introduced them to the band. The first person we ran into after we got out of the car was Garcia.
Nice.
Jerry was in the production office, like on a phone call, and he hangs up just as we get there. And I say, oh, Jerry, man, I'd like to meet my parents. I said, this is their first time, so be gentle with them. And Jerry said, yeah, we'll try not to scare you too bad. And they were utterly charmed by that. And I took them up on stage to meet Phil. And, they met all of them, I think. And
did they stay for the whole show?
They stayed for the whole show.
Oh, good.
The first set, we were actually in the seats. And I remembered at one point they were playing, I think, Tennessee Jet, a really good version of Tennessee Jet. And I told my mom, I said, sometimes these guys have good nights, and sometimes they have not so good nights. You kind of got to be patient and bear with them, and they kind of like the show kind of unfolds. And midway through this version of Tennessee Jet, my mom turns to me and she says, "I think they're having a good night." I said, "Compared to what?" How does she know? But actually, once I was working for the band, when there would be a Dead fundraising special on PBS where they'd show the Grateful Dead movie or something, they always watched and they really enjoyed it. So they were kind of prepared. They knew what they were in for. And then so we watched the the first set from reserved seats, and then the second set they let us go down to the soundboard and sit on the couch behind Dan Healy. And I told him, Walter Cronkite was on this couch last night, which he was. And, they were just so treated so well. And they, it just made me feel so good. And they had such a good time. They got it.
So much love, Gary. So
yeah,
cool.
it was, that was a beautiful night for me, obviously. Did
they get limoed home?
Oh yeah. We got the whole thing. No, it was, they weren't going to put us on the F train after that.
Yeah, you guys just take the bus.
Mm-hmm.
Get on the train, just take the bus. My parents went to a couple of shows, but they went to a Chinese New Year show and a
Oh
Mardi
yeah.
Gras show.
Hmm.
And that's when my dad met Jerry and Bill.
Oh right. I love that story. Yeah.
Good story. Wow. So it is a great night, and that story is just so. I've heard it 3 times. Oh, you
Yeah.
can't purchase it in Canada.
You can't what?
You can't purchase the movie. A couple of people have found the book. A
Okay.
copy of the book is on eBay and one in thriftbooks.com. And
Uh-huh.
then there's someone, Marilee Queen Jane Wilson. She's bummed she can't purchase by leaps and bounds here in Canada.
Oh, my brother and I have talked about, and maybe we'll reinitiate this. Talk about maybe getting it made into an ebook or something. We'd have to figure it out with the Holocaust Museum because yeah. I mean, the rights. My mom had the rights to it, but they were the publishers of records. So maybe that can happen one of these days. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I'd love
I'd
to.
love to see it be more
I think
widely
William
available.
has a copy of it. So
Cool.
maybe he'll lend me his copy. I would like to read it. And I just every time you tell the story, which it's been 3 times, there's
Hmm.
different bits that I soak in, I grok at that time, and
Yeah.
it's a powerful story. And
Yeah.
here you
And I've kept learning things about it. Like I hear little details every now and then that I didn't know before, and it's such an it's a horrible story.
are horrible.
It's just harrowing and scary and infuriating and just, inflames your sense of rage at any injustice. But it's also so inspiring and so beautiful. And, and it's inextricably tied to the love story of my parents. It's many, many paradoxes at work.
And I'm still just tripping on the curtains, the
Yeah.
couch, and your
Uh-huh.
shirt,
Hmm.
and the glass.
Yeah, the glasses.
It's all
Yeah, this
it's
is,
all one.
my dad probably drank many a gin and tonic out of those
Please don't
glasses.
get rid of that glass.
No, I'm actually keeping several of the cooler bar glasses.
Okay. Good.
We have a lot of them, so
Bar glasses are very, yep, very
yeah.
important. Very important. And so, okay, so you're here. It is a
I
powerful Rich gives you 5 bananas for the story. I'm gonna go with 6.
All right.
I'm going with 6 bananas or 36.
36, yeah. 30,
Okay.
36
There's
is
the
the
way.
goal. Always the goal.
So speaking of food,
Yeah.
what have you been eating?
Well, it's been kind of hit and run, because there's not that much cooking time in the house right now. There's like so much going on. Um, oh, I had really good jerk chicken last night. I found a place way south in Jamaica, not Jamaica, the island, not so far south, but South Jamaica, Queens, almost to JFK. It was a long drive. Because I got turned on to this jerk chicken place. That was last night, and I have some leftovers for tomorrow. That was really good. Called Forever Jerk. That's the name of the restaurant.
And did you stumble upon it? Did you know it was there?
I actually had seen some time ago a rave review of the place by Pete Wells in the New York Times, who's a really excellent food writer, and I sort of filed it away. And I was in a jerk chicken kind of frame of mind yesterday, so I went down there. And in my new old car, which I love,
Your
and
new old car.
my new old car. And what else have I had this week? I don't know. It's like food has been like the least of my concerns in a way. Oh, I did go to Umberto's in New Hyde Park for a couple of slices of pizza today because my storage space is in New Hyde Park, which is a little ways into Nassau County on Long Island. So that worked out nicely. Anytime I can be near Umberto's, that's good.
And so you're here. This is the last. You won't be in the house next Saturday, most likely.
I would think probably not. There's a chance I'll be in the house, but the couch won't. We don't know the timetable for when after the appraisers or the purchasers of the stuff get it out. The next phase is getting everything else out, which the contractor is like contracting people to do the hauling. that might not happen until early next week. So I could have this coming weekend in the house. I could outlast the couch in the house. We'll see.
Yeah, my
Maybe I'll
friend
just.
Tammy lives in Queens too. You need to meet Tammy, Gary, Tammy.
Hi, Tammy.
Yeah, she's lives in Queens. We're talking about getting the book reprint. You're talking about reprinting it, or at least making an ebook of it.
Yeah, yeah. I would like that. I'd like it to be available again.
Rich just said he'll give the story a banana tree.
Right, and maybe even expand it. Like include some of our mom's story after. Because I think the book only goes up to the early 2000s, and all this other stuff happened. So we'll see. We'll see.
And I do recall,
Mm-hmm.
Greg Martens.
Yes.
Greg saw, or how was he connected to on Pawn Stars, your mom's uniform?
Oh, yeah. I heard something about that. I can't remember the details either.
And I don't know if Greg had actually had it, or someone he had known had her uniform, and they
Uh-huh.
went to Pawn Stars, and it was they went to the Pawn Star place
I'll have to
shop, and
find it.
then it was actually on the show.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I've heard that, but I've never tracked it down.
I talk to him
Um,
on occasion, and that's going to be forefront in our next conversation.
cool. So, and let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. What have I eaten? Have I been out to any music? It's all been kind of a blur, you
Yeah,
know. It's the last few weeks have been kind of this very
it's intense.
compressed and intense reality. Um, I wish I was going to be at Freight and Salvage tomorrow night for the
Tomorrow
Pete
night.
Engelhardt.
Yeah.
Do you know Pete at all?
Oh yeah, of course. I've
Yeah,
been to the studio. Oh yeah, I've known.
yeah, yeah. I've actually known of Pete since almost the day I moved to the Bay Area in 1974, because I stayed with friends for a few days before I moved into my first apartment in Oakland. I stayed with friends who lived on Cherry Street,
Mhm.
and Pete and Locha were their next door neighbors. And they said, oh yeah, Airto and Flora are living with them right now because when Airto came to Berkeley to work on make records at Fantasy,
Fantasy,
he,
exactly.
he lived with the Engelhardts. And then so years later, I become friends with Cecilia and Claudia and Selena, and Pete. Pete was building instruments for Mickey and Billy, as well as for Peter Applebaum, and just everyone else we know. So
People keep saying all your friends are playing tomorrow night at the Freight and Salvage. I
yeah,
said, my friends are playing tonight. They're playing all over. Sylvia's playing tonight at the Sound Room.
yeah, yeah,
John Arbur's playing at the Jazz Conservatory with Tony and Michael O'Neill, and it's a lot.
yeah. For those who don't know, Pete Engelhardt is essentially a sculptor, a metal sculptor, uh, 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 and he specializes in making metallic percussion instruments, bells and gongs, and um, extraordinary. They are both visual works of art and incredible sounding instruments. And he's about to turn 87, I think.
I think
Uh,
80. Is it 87 or
I
84?
think I think
Maybe.
it's 87.
Okay.
Maybe I'll find a link. There was this Berkeley Side article on him, and I'll put the link up. But yeah, I've got it right here. I'll post the link. Yeah, Pete. Yeah, he just makes these incredible welded.
They're
Uh,
87. 87th
yeah,
celebration concert
yeah,
will feature 14 performers, all of whom go back decades, with Engelhardt family, Locha, Selena, Cecilia, Claudia, and Peter.
yeah. They're all such amazing people. I mean, I know
Jackson
Cloud.
was there.
Yeah,
Peter,
I know I know Claudia the best because she was like mixing sound for the Hieroglyphics Ensemble when they were all barely out of Berkeley High, and and I know Cecilia pretty well. Selena lives in Santa Fe, so I don't know her as well, but I know her. Um, but
Selena is
yeah,
really close friends with Andy and Shauna.
ah,
Dr. Andy, the Andy and
ah,
Shauna Rader, and
wow,
Selena are like, yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
And of course, Claudia has been Bill Frisell's house sound mixer and tour manager for going on 30 years now, I think.
I met
Um,
Claudia when I went. Was it called Green Street? It was a jazz
yeah,
club
yeah.
in the 80s, and David
Right.
Peaston. I don't know if you remember who David
I
Peaston
very much remember David Peaston.
was
Yeah.
performing there. I had seen him
Mhm.
on Showtime at the Apollo.
Right. He killed on that show. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on it for
Yeah.
like you turn it on 3 months later,
Yeah.
he was still winning on
Yeah.
Showtime. And then
Right.
stumbled upon that, and then there she was. I'm like, that was one of my first times in New York, and then I'm seeing all these people from Berkeley in New York, and yeah,
Yeah.
and David Peaston. Oh, he was an
He was
absolute.
amazing.
Oh,
Yeah. So
oh,
yes, I have posted a link to this article about Pete Engelhardt, and it's
thank you.
really fascinating.
Yeah, I wish I was going to be in the Bay Area this weekend, and that's where I would have
Right.
been tomorrow night. But
Yeah. But you're
someone
going to Telluride.
wanted to Telluride.
Oh God, I love to. I've only been to Telluride twice, both thanks to Bill Graham. And
Do you have any suggestions for me?
I was so absorbed in what was going on at those shows that I didn't really do
Do you
a
play at
lot
the
of.
Opera House? They play at the Opera House?
No, this was when the Grateful Dead played in Town Park at the same
Oh,
place where they have the Bluegrass Festival. Th-
really? That's where I'll be. That's where the Jazz Festival is.
Oh yeah, they have the Bluegrass Festival and the Jazz Festival. This was this amazing inspiration. Bill had a house in Telluride, and he walked down Main Street and came to the sign that said "Dead End," and he said,
Got it.
"Dead here," and he put on these two. The first time there had ever been rock shows of that magnitude in Telluride, and then a couple of years later, 3 years later, he put on a more of a festival thing with the Allman Brothers and various other bands. All in the park there. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, Michael Peltz,
Yes.
his brother,
Hmm.
Arnie, has a house there
Oh, beautiful.
a mile away from the park, and that's where I'm staying. And my friend Jim Berkowitz, who is the one that lives in Telluride, invited me to the festival. So it's
Fabulous. Well, have you ever been there?
no.
It's
I've
the
been
I'm
close. I've been to Durango. I've been everywhere.
Yeah,
I've been within like two
yeah.
hours.
Telluride is such a breathtakingly beautiful place. I mean, just being there without doing anything is like a revelation.
And
And
it's
then,
apparently quite cool right now.
oh,
It's
that's good.
and rainy. I,
Nice.
I've been every day. I read more, and I'm watching the news or with the weather, and I'm readjusting. I'm going. I think I'm going to bring my boots. I think I'm going to
Hmm.
bring. Yeah, it's a small town for sure, but and what I like is Arnie's place is right in that area, right in that immediate
Hmm.
area. So I'm just going to walk everywhere.
Yeah, I know it's very easy to get around.
I'm a little nervous about the altitude, but
It can mess you up, but hydrate, take it easy, don't overexert, sing a lot of ballads.
a lot about. Well, that's been when I played Jazz Aspen. I did 6 concerts in 3 days,
Wow.
and I was just by the third night I was a wreck, and
It kind of wipes you out. Yeah. I mean,
I
people
had to
don't
go to the
know.
hospital. No, I got
Yeah.
I
People don't,
got
yeah.
altitude sickness, bad, bad, bad. And my friend Nancy took me to a friend of hers had a hyperbaric chamber
Oh, that's good.
after I
That's
got
good.
out of the hospital,
Hmm.
and hung out there for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then I hung out at the sheriff's house, and then I was in Woody Creek, next door to where someone we know lived in Woody Creek, Colorado. And yeah, so I'm a little nervous.
Yeah. It is surprising the effect it can have on you. I was okay when I was there, but you got to be very careful. You don't know you're overexerting yourself because you're engaged in fairly normal activity. It doesn't feel strenuous, and then all of a sudden you're just, yeah.
So, like Suzanne said, I'm going to prepare. And there's a couple of supplements I've read about, and I go, oh,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
I'll do it. So yeah, so Tuesday, so next Saturday, if you're around, and do you have any concert plans, or is there any music coming up that you're?
There is some stuff coming. I've again, I'm being very lax about checking what's coming up. I know Frizzell's got some stuff coming up to the Vanguard. He's actually playing this week as part of Andrew Cyril, but then he's going to play a couple of gigs with his own band as well. So I'm sure I'll get to that. So there's I have been inattentive to a lot of musical stuff. There's a beautiful thing that was going on tonight up in Woodstock, a creative music studio, having a big kind of celebration gala that I thought about going up to, and then I said, no, it's a little too ambitious right now.
Yeah, you have this in front of you.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, and then
it was just.
Well,
I've been waiting all week. I'm like, Gary's going to be on Saturday night. Like, Gary's on every Saturday. Well, no, this is different. This is from the couch. He's going to talk about his mom. It's just going to be Dad, and it's going to be. And are you going to make a meal in the house before? We talked about that.
Yeah, well, I did when I thought the deadline was coming up sooner. I did like a characteristic parental, like a steak and baked potato, and that was deeply satisfying. We may have one more in a select like that. My mom's recipes are here.
Oh, okay.
So I'm thinking of maybe picking one of the gems, and we'll see. It's also too damn hot to cook. So
I know.
We'll
it's so damn hot. It's like,
yes.
If someone
so
goes,
we'll see.
Go out for a walk today, I'm going, yeah, I'm going to go for a walk. I went for a walk tonight.
Yeah.
Around 8:30. There's a chalk the block in my hometown right now. Mm-hmm. So there's 2 blocks. There's a couple things happening here. There was a relay for life tonight,
mm-hmm.
and then chalk the block, and then I walked down to where my parents used to live in the condo, and had a divine moment with my father. And but there's a cool thing in Buchanan. If anyone's ever heard of Buchanan, Michigan, they did a street long slip and slide.
Wow.
And it's happening till 1 o'clock. So it's still happening. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 right now. It's happening for 26 more minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And tomorrow, you have to bring a floaty and you slip and slide down the street.
I love it. Sounds cool? Great.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe next year. But I miss you, and I do hope I get to see you when I'm in New York, whenever that is. I'm not sure when
absolutely.
that is.
Well, I know you'll be here again, and New York will be here, and I will be somewhere. This is interesting, like not knowing exactly what my proximity to New York's going to
be. Welcome to my world.
Yeah, I'm going to be. I will be for the interim. I will be about an hour and a half outside the city, but that's cool. I actually like the drive. It's a nice drive.
Will you be there through the winter?
Well, a lot of it depends on how fast the house sells. I'm prepared. My friends are incredibly accommodating and said, as long as it takes, and then if I wear out my welcome, I have other friends I can prevail upon, but I'll try not to wear out my welcome. I can be very low profile if I'm staying with people. I spend a lot of time out. I'll be coming down to the city, I imagine, quite a bit. When I have the responsibility of the house out of the way, and I don't have a regular live streaming regimen, like I did all summer, I'll have the radio show to do on Sundays, and then my weeks will be very unstructured. So,
is the radio show started back in the city at this point?
I'm still doing it from home. I will be able to. I actually did a test. I went up to Connecticut and tested their internet connectivity to make sure that it was strong enough. Because it's not Wi-Fi, it's got to be plugged right into a router, to do this. Because the radio show we do with this little box, which is like sort of plugging into a remote studio. So that's going to work from Connecticut.
But no plans at this point. They haven't said on.
They're trying. They're trying to keep, because it's in this big office building. It's really hard to regulate how. Yeah, 45 stories or something. And just in the middle of Rockefeller Center, it's a mob scene, so they're trying to keep it from being a mob scene. So they're saying anyone who can still work remotely should continue to work remotely. until further notice, and that's fine with me. And now that I'm going to be an hour and a half outside the city, it's kind of essential. I don't want to. I could drive in every Sunday if they wanted me to, but it's nice to have the little box. And so I'm confident I can do the show from up there for as long as I need to. And then we'll see. I'm already looking at Zillow and the places, and the places where you look for apartments and stuff. And it's a very interesting process, seeing like what's exorbitant and what isn't, and what's and the affordability will be dictated by what the house yields, and it's going to be an adventure. It's going to be a little scary. That part of it's really kind of. I mean, because I haven't looked for a place to live. I lived in the same apartment in Oakland for 30 years, and I lived here for
right next door to my friend Russ.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, it's this part of it is going to be, just a whole new thing, and I will try to look at it as exciting rather than terrifying. That's it. That's my mantra right now is.
What are you gonna do? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you can do some traveling too.
There's that. I would have the freedom to take a trip out to the Bay Area, or
oh, you're going to be in Illinois.
Briefly, yes, right. That festival. Really, I might go a day early and spend a day in Chicago, and then go to
what's the date on that?
The festival is the 26th through the 28th. I'm only going on the 26th. That's when Philco is playing. And yeah, that's coming up. That's like right around the corner now.
So you might be in Chicago on the 25th?
I think I would like to have just a Chicago day. Would you like to have a Chicago day?
I'd love to have a Chicago day with you.
I could maybe even get a +1 for the festival.
Yes, please.
Let me ask if I can.
Please.
I'll see if I can work that out.
Okay, let me know.
All right.
It's not in Chicago though, it's out.
Well, it's very close. It's like 15, 20 minutes outside of town. It's I forget what the town. It's definitely suburban Chicago.
I love 70s on 7. JJ Walker, Dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Dave Love. Yeah. I'm around.
All right.
I might be going to Chicago on the 26th and the 25th.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Let me.
All right.
I'll drop the promoter a line. We'll
Thank
talk.
you, Gary Lambert.
Thank you, Jenna Mammina. The couch would like to thank everybody for the continued support and cards and letters.
Can we see it close?
Let me
speaker view you.
Yeah.
You and the couch and that it's just all one. You're all one with the couch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The couch, like I said, the fabric goes with me.
Yeah.
Remnants of the couch will always be with me.
That lamp behind you going with you?
I think that's probably something that that one of the takers is going to take.
I'm a lamp girl.
I like old lamps too.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That is a good one. If they didn't take it, maybe I'll take it. I don't know. I'm sure there's stuff they turned down.
Yeah. Well, I don't even want to say goodnight, but now that I know I'm going to see you in Chicago, and maybe I'll see you next Saturday night while I'm in Telluride.
In Telluride. Oh, beautiful. Well, if you can connect from Telluride, that would be great. I would love to be even vicariously in Telluride.
All right, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, so I may be connecting from here, but without a couch, or I may be connecting from Connecticut. I don't know yet.
Rich said it's like watching a black and white TV in color. It really is.
It is kind of old. It has an old school. This is like like Rob and Laura Petrie could have been sitting on this couch.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Oh, Rob. Yeah. Hey, Rob. Right, thanks again. Rob put it up, and then I shared it. The commercial, the 11:11 with Jenna commercial. It's starring Gary Lambert.
Excellent. Well, it was really starring my mom though.
Yeah.
And my dad and my couch. I was merely a co-star.
Well, you're quite a co-star. You stand out in my heart for sure. Thank you so much.
Well, as you do in mine.
Love you, man.
Love you. Love everybody in the 1111 fam.
Love
And
hard, everybody.
real hard.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Wow. Night, everybody.